Welcome back to another episode of 10 Minute Horror. Thanks for joining us once again. I hope you're nice and comfortable. Tonight, we're checking back in with Jane and Clay to see what kind of trouble they're getting into. This is Never Hold Your Breath, Part 3, The Town. At this depth, it was insane to think how clear and far we could see, but the marine snow cloud that hung over us seemed to be giving off a top light. It passed through the green glow of the water, which gave the town an emerald look, like Oz. The color was the only thing that reminded me of that, though, and I hoped there wouldn't be a curtain to pull back, let alone something behind it. The pit that made a home in my stomach turned into an anvil. The house, maybe, I could see it not being listed by the renters. They could have not known about it even, but a whole town? Not mentioning that is the same as hiding it. But why? My next thought, frighteningly, was I knew for sure we'd be using our entire tanks this dive. This thought was underlined when I realized Clay was halfway out of the hole and swimming out towards the town. I quickly grabbed one of his fins and gave it a shake to get his attention. He turned back, floating outside the house now. I waved my hands no and shook my head vigorously. He shrugged, motioned for me to stay, turned, and off he went. As he swam towards the town, a chill crept up my spine. I got the feeling something was watching that interaction, had been watching and waiting for this moment, hoping the moment would rise where I was left alone and vulnerable. All she has is a flashlight and a knife that's still in its sheath, it would think. I instinctively pulled my knife out. Fuck it, we only have so much air left. Clay'll have to turn back in 20 minutes anyways. Just stick by him for 20 minutes, I thought. 20 minutes. He can't visit every house, and you don't have to come back down if he wants to tomorrow or the next day. I pushed off, out of the hole in the back wall, kicking my fins into high gear. But just as I was leaving the hole, I felt a strong tug on my back left fin. I kicked back violently and quickly pulled away. I turned back as I swam, and I swear, I saw the face in that first painting. That eel face, lips pulled back over its teeth, staring out at me from the shadows of the bedroom, a flap of my bright blue fin in its teeth. But then it was gone, back into the shadows. Or maybe it wasn't there to begin with. I kicked away from the house like it was on fire. I caught up to Clay as he started swimming down towards the main street of the town. Small stores and houses lined both sides, and Clay appeared to want to roll down the center line like he was leading a parade. All the structures had impact damage on their far side, like they had been hit by a wave. Clay cracked 2 glow sticks and did a little rave dance with them directed at me. His hands knocked together and he dropped one accidentally. I watched it drop to the roadway below, landing on a sewer and falling through the grate. The green glow died quickly as the stick disappeared into the depths of the sewer. It was scary to think that even down here, there was deeper and darker depths. I felt guilty as we swam down Main Street. I should be thinking how incredible this is. I remember hearing a quote about how you could throw a rock in a lake and be the last person to touch that rock for thousands of years, maybe for the rest of time itself. And here we were, swimming through an underwater town, untouched for the last 50 to 100 years, and probably the last people to swim through it and see it like this. Maybe ever. But all I could think about were all the dark, empty windows in the houses and stores. They reminded me of those old oil canvas paintings with the Baroque frames. The eyes in those paintings always follow you. Left, right, up, down. They move where you move. I was now getting the same feeling looking at those empty, dark windows. They stared up at us like eyes. The further we swam down the main street, the more it felt like those open windows were watching us, following us, and no matter where we went, they'd know. We continued down Main Street, taking note of all the old cars that were upturned or flipped. The damage to the backs of houses and stores got worse the further we went down Main Street, like we were getting closer to the Ground Zero event. Then we saw it. It didn't make sense that it would be there, at the bottom of the lake, but neither did the house, or the town, or anything. I'd never seen anything like it in person, though our family had talked about visiting one in Belize, or the Red Sea, or even the Amberjack in Sarasota. But here one was, a blue hole at the center of the town we found at the bottom of the lake. It looked to be about 60 feet across, with beautifully carved cement structures and barriers around it, making it appear to be the town's centerpiece. Clay swam right up over top of it, floating above the middle and looking down into its utter darkness. Outer space felt safer, but I joined him, floating above the circle, looking down into its mouth. I remember hearing that blue holes were formed back in the Ice Age, after sea levels rose and filled sinkholes, which was what they were. Massive sinkholes. They were safe, or safe enough. Lots of people free-dive them, testing their lung capacity and challenging themselves with new depths. But those touristy ones always had a bottom. They always stopped at a point. Who knows how deep this one went? Images of massive sea snakes, eels, and Lovecraftian creatures flooded my mind. Clay pulled out the bag of glow sticks, which only had 2 left. He pushed them aside and pulled out the flare and started fiddling with it. It sparked and lit up bright red. I was shocked with how much light it gave off, but also how it made the rest of our surroundings look so much darker. Clay let the flare drop. We watched it tumble as it caught small currents on its way down. Watching it fall, I didn't know which was scarier, for it to land so we would know where the bottom was and for Clay to want to adventure down to it, or for the flare to keep falling until it got too far and the darkness swallowed it up. I watched it drop, spiraling downward methodically, mesmerizing me, the red glow swirling, dimming, the magnet pulling. I felt a strong pain in my arm and snapped back to reality. Clay grabbed my arm, yanking me back. I hadn't realized it, but I'd floated down several feet towards the hole. I floated back up to Clay, embarrassed, and looked back down just in time to see the flare turn into the tiniest red dot before disappearing. I guess we wouldn't know how deep the hole went. Clay waved his hands at me, asking what was up. I shrugged it off. No way to explain it down here, I thought. Then Clay's eye line moved over my shoulder, somewhere behind me. I turned and followed his vision. On the other side of the blue hole, a large church faced us. Pillars and a pointed roof with a large crucifix on top reaching upwards. The front door and windows were boarded up and its roof was in shambles, but it stood there, steadily enough. Before I could grab Clay's arm, he was swimming off towards the church. I checked my air. 15 minutes left, which meant we had 5 more minutes down here before we had to start making our way back. I quickly caught up to Clay and caught his attention, showing him my remaining air tank reading. He didn't appear worried. It showed me his gauge, which was 2 minutes less than mine. Not a surprise he was going through it faster. He signaled the number 5 for 5 more minutes and kept swimming towards the church. I hate when he does shit like this. Not just him, but divers in general. Planning to run out of gas as the plane lands, no room for error, staying down longer and giving yourself less time at your safety stop before resurfacing. Just more of Clay thinking he was invincible. He was someone who needed dramatic intervention. It was the only way he'd learn. I'm surprised he hadn't gone the bends before in any of our dives. Not wanting to go directly towards the church, I swam to the side of the blue hole and followed the street that led to the church. Unfortunately, I realized I was swimming beside the previously unseen cemetery that curved out from behind the church. Above water, I had a fear of cemeteries. 70 to 80 feet down, this was a whole other fear. But it wasn't just that it was a cemetery. It was that all the graves had been dug up. All of them. Hundreds of headstones with empty rectangular holes in front of them. I don't think there was an untouched grave in the entire cemetery. I just prayed Clay didn't notice it. I imagined he'd want to check every single one of the graves for something gross to bring back. But as I thought that, I looked back over to Clay and saw him now at the church door, pulling off the planks of wood that kept it nailed shut. What the fuck was he doing? We didn't have time for this shit. I was officially pissed off at him now. This was getting dangerous. I swam over to him as he was pulling the last plank off the door. I whacked him in the arm, which worked well in getting his attention. He held his hands up, shrugging at me again. I motioned for us to go up, showing my air gauge. He checked his and saw where it was, pretending to be surprised. He put it down and gave me the 2 sign with his fingers. 2 more minutes. Again. He was really trying to hit the surface as his oxygen ran out. I shook my head, no. He shrugged, the bastard, and gave me the 2 sign again. Then he pushed the doors open and swam in. I want to say I watched him swim away in disbelief, but it was typically believable. And I didn't watch him. I got visions of all the residents of those empty graves sitting on the pews, waiting for someone to let them out, and I turned away. The town was eerie, but peaceful in a strange way. I slid down the wall of the church and sat, letting my eyes scan across the town. I felt like I was a kid again, sitting at the bottom of the public pool while people swam above me, clueless to my existence. I thought about the flare Clay dropped down the blue hole. Was it still falling? Something caught my eye, movement, somewhere in the distance, but I couldn't lock on to anything. It was like my peripherals were spasming from the movement just out of view, but when I checked, there was nothing there. I gave it a moment and realized it was the water that was moving, something in the water. Then it clicked. Marine snow, organic material floating down from that cloud thing. It actually did look like snow, and I thought of us in a nightmare snow globe again, one that had just been shaken. Wait, marine snow was an ocean thing. It was dead animals and plants, sand, soot, all kinds of shit. But it didn't occur in shallower waters, especially not lakes. The ecosystem isn't large enough. Where was this coming from? And why did it hang like a cloud? Maybe it wasn't marine snow. Okay, stop thinking like that. I had been aware how much I was scaring myself since Clay and I had come down, and with good reason. But Clay's time was up. Both of our times were up. Fuck it. I turned back to the church and swam in through the doors. The church was brighter than I imagined. The roof at the back was missing entirely. The arches remained. Emerald green light poured in, creating columns of light through the interior. Marine snow, or whatever it was falling in and collecting in the visible pockets of light. Old Bibles floated everywhere, all opened and frozen in time. The organ had been destroyed, with the few pipes remaining pointed in every direction. The pews had been pushed away from the pulpit, some sticking up and piled on top of others, but there was no sign of Clay. I scanned through the massive room, hoping to see some bubbles. I figured he was probably trying to scare me, but one thing he couldn't hide were his bubbles. Even with his carelessness, he wouldn't hold his breath this long just to scare me. Anger and fear were meshing inside me in frightening ways. Clay was so selfish. I had half a mind to leave him down here and swim back by myself, but that was a lot to take at the moment. There was only one option, so there I went. I kicked and sent myself further down the aisle towards the pulpit. I looked between each of the pews that were still upright, but no sign of him. Nothing at the front. I looked up but only saw the vaulted arches above, and that strange marine snow drifting down from the large holes in the ceiling. Where the hell was he? Coming in here, I didn't expect not to see him right away, but the room was empty. Did he swim up and out the back ceiling? Shit, where else could he be? As I scanned my flashlight back through the church, that's when I saw the door. It was at the back left of the organ, ajar. I swam towards it nervously, half expecting it to burst open and be overrun by a horde of half-decomposed villagers. I peeked in through the crack with my torch, but it was too dark. I had to go in. I pushed the door open and entered. Books and papers floated everywhere, but what my torch caught was the floor. There was a large hole in it, about 6 feet tall, 2 feet wide, similar to the one back at the first house. The hole looked like it was dug up through the rock, again like a honeycomb. Suddenly, the bottom of 2 sets of shoes floated down in front of me. I screamed in my mask and shot backwards. There was a body in the room. I could see it floating there, motionless. I moved back towards the door. It was a man, limbs floating in different directions. A rope attached to a roof support beam and looped around his neck kept the man from floating too far. As the man rotated, I saw a clergy collar under the rope. The priest had hung himself. It was time to go. I now had to look out for myself. Clay's system would set off an alarm and he'd book it out. If he got the bends, that would be on him. He wouldn't because he's lucky like that, but for now, I needed to go up. I swam back into the church, double-checking again that I didn't miss him, but there was no sign of Clay. I had one last idea. I'd swim up and over the church, giving myself enough space to see both sides and the entire town. Then I'd go up. I swam up and out through the missing ceiling at the back. It appeared the church had been built at the far end of the valley, with nothing behind it but the steep upslope to the dry land 70 feet above. From this angle, the entire layout of the town made sense. The church was at the back of the valley, the cemetery to its left, what looked to be a hospital to the right, the blue hole right in front of all three, with a main street on the fourth side that split the town down the middle. It was very symmetrical. But there was no sign of Clay anywhere. No bubbles, no glow sticks, no torch. The only movement was the marine snow drifting down like an eerie Christmas morning. This didn't feel right, none of it. Clay wouldn't go off without me for this long, and he certainly wouldn't go up by himself. He'd find me. He was my older brother, and he'd find me. Before I realized it, I'd floated away from the church and was now above the blue hole. I felt the magnet in my chest again, that little tug downward into the hole, but there was no way I was going down there. I wouldn't even look down. Then I saw them. Bubbles. They floated upwards, passing me, about 5 feet away. They came from deep down in the blue hole. My eyes scanned through the dark, trying to follow the bubbles. It was pitch, but one bit of light stood out. A green glow stick, another 50 feet down into the hole. That was one of ours. Did it fall out of Clay's bag? Did it float away from one of the places we dropped it? I knew I had to make a fast decision, quickly investigate, or head up. Seconds were ticking as I thought about it. He could be hurt, in trouble, something, shit. I tucked in and nosedived, paddling down as fast and calmly as I could. Just as I entered the blue hole, I felt the temperature drop. Even through my suit, it was cold, and getting colder. I looked at the sides of the hole as I swam down. It was really just a large tunnel, and the green was getting closer. My body started to chill and my ears popped again, but I kept swimming down. The glow stick was getting closer. The walls of the blue hole were narrowing as I swam down further. It was about 20 feet across now instead of 60. The glow stick, 10 feet now. 5 feet. Got to it. It was stuck on a broken chunk of rock hanging out from the blue hole. I spun around looking to see if there was anything more, but I was the only one down here. I fumbled the glow stick, dropping it and watching it spiral down. It just kept falling. Okay, I came and checked. This must have fallen down here, and Clay's probably, better be, at the surface wondering where I am. But just as I was about to kick off, I realized I was floating in front of a large hole in the side of the wall, a hole large enough to swim into, surrounded by other, smaller holes in that honeycomb pattern, just like the church and the first house's basement. And there, sitting several feet inside the large tunnel broken into the rock, was Clay's torch. And that concludes part 3 of Never Hold Your Breath. We hope you enjoyed this story as much as we did, and we'll see you back here in a few days for part 4, The Tunnels.